My name is Margaret Holloway. I taught second grade for 40 years in a small town called Cedar Valley, about an hour north of Portland. If you ever want to know how time really moves, teach children how to read. Every syllable feels like a day, every school year like a chapter you blink through and somehow miss at the same time. I married Robert Holloway when I was 19. He was a journalist back then, the kind who still carried notebooks and wrote in the margins. He had this calmness about him, the kind that made you believe life was survivable. He used to tell me, "Maggie, the world can be loud, but the truth never needs to shout." We raised 3 boys, Daniel, Paul, and Evan. They grew up, moved away, built their own lives. Robert passed in 2010, a heart attack that came too quick, too clean. After that, the house got too big for me. The silence started sounding like grief. So when Evan, my youngest, said, "Mom, sell your house and move in with us. You'll be with the kids and we'll take care of you," I believed him. I sold my townhouse, the one Robert and I spent 30 years paying off. Every picture came down, every nail hole patched, every memory folded into a cardboard box labeled "Mom, keep safe." I told myself being needed is the same as being loved. Evan and his wife, Rachel, welcomed me warmly at first. They cleared out the garage, called it Grandma's Suite, and painted the walls cream to make it feel cozy. It had a small window, a twin bed, a bathroom that smelled faintly of mildew, and a tiny TV. It wasn't much, but I told myself it was enough. At first, I felt useful. I made breakfast for the kids before school, helped with laundry, kept the house in order. Rachel would come home and thank me in that careful, distant tone people use when gratitude feels like an obligation. But it didn't take long for things to change. It started small, as it always does. Little comments, light jabs disguised as humor. One evening I baked cornbread the way I always had, golden edges, buttered top. Rachel looked at it, laughed, and said, "Wow, real butter? We try to eat healthy now." Then she took a photo of the pan and sent it to someone, smirking. I smiled, because that's what older women do when we feel unwelcome in our own families. We smile so the moment passes faster. Over the next few months, she started calling me old-fashioned, fragile, the relic in the garage. Sometimes she said it in front of the kids. Once my granddaughter asked, "What's a relic?" Rachel said, "It's something you keep around even when it doesn't work anymore." Evan laughed. That laughter stayed with me longer than the words. Then came the isolation. At first, it was polite. "Mom, maybe rest while we have company," Rachel would say. Then the door would close, soft click, then a lock turning. She said it was to keep the kids from bothering Grandma. I wanted to believe that, until I started hearing their voices through the wall. They'd laugh, eat, pour drinks, music. And when the guests left, no one came to unlock my door for hours. Once she slid a sandwich under the door, no plate, no napkin, just bread drying at the edges. That's when I stopped lying to myself. I was a prisoner in the house I had paid for. The morning after that phone call, I woke before the sun. For the first time in months, I had a plan. Small, careful, but mine. Evelyn said she'd handle everything. All I needed to do was act ordinary and keep writing. Ordinary, I could do. I'd spent 40 years pretending patience. I made breakfast, folded towels, smiled when Rachel gave me that brittle good morning smile. She didn't notice the change. Bullies rarely do. At 9 sharp, Evelyn called again. Her tone was brisk, businesslike. "We're sending someone this afternoon. Her name's Carla Benton, investigative reporter. She's part of the Lantern Network. Let her in through the back door if you can." "Through the laundry room window," I said. "It sticks, but it opens." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Good. You'll fit right in with us." That afternoon, when Rachel left for yoga and Evan took the kids to practice, I unlocked the window. A woman about 30 climbed through, brushed off the rain, and smiled. Short hair, camera bag, eyes sharp as a hawk. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, "your husband helped my father years ago. I owe him. Let's make this count." She set up 2 tiny cameras, one behind a photo frame in the living room, another above the garage door. Both wireless, both quiet. She handed me a small black pen. "Voice recorder. Push once to start, once to stop. Keep it close." I nodded. My hands shook a little. She touched my wrist. "You're safe now. We just have to prove it." By nightfall, the Lantern's quiet machine had started turning. Evelyn's legal team drew up reports. Carla monitored the feed from her office. All I had to do was keep breathing and keep being underestimated. The first recording came easily. Rachel standing in the kitchen, yelling because I used the wrong sponge. Her voice snapped like cold metal. "You don't listen. You make messes and then expect applause." I said nothing. I let the pen in my pocket blink. 2 nights later, the house lost heat again. My room only. I asked about it at breakfast. Evan said, "Mom, stop being dramatic. It's not that cold." Rachel added, "You grew up tougher. You'll survive." Carla's camera caught the thermostat glowing a steady 72 in their hallway, while mine read 58. Proof number 2. By day 5, the Lantern team had enough to act. Evelyn told me to pack a small bag, hide it by the door, and wait. At noon, 2 unmarked cars pulled into the drive, one from Adult Protective Services, one from the local police. Rachel's laughter died in her throat when the officer stepped inside. Evan looked like a man who'd lost the ending of his own story. They asked me to step out. I walked past Rachel, who hissed, "You're ruining everything." I whispered back, "You already did." They escorted me to a car, wrapped a blanket over my shoulders. Evelyn was waiting at the station. Tall, silver-haired, eyes kind but unflinching. She shook my hand like we were partners, not victim and rescuer. "You did perfectly," she said. "Now let us take it from here." Over the next 2 days, the Lantern and the local paper released the story. Locked away by her own family, an educator's quiet plea for justice. It spread faster than I expected. People don't always read kindness, but they devour cruelty. The video compilation Carla edited lasted exactly 60 seconds. Rachel calling me a parasite. Evan ignoring me when I asked for dinner. The locked door, the sandwich under it, the baby monitor audio. It was enough. The footage aired on local news by evening. By dawn, it was trending nationwide. Reporters camped outside the house. Evan was placed on leave from his job. Rachel's preschool fired her the same morning. Evelyn told me, "We'll handle the legal side. You focus on breathing again." They took me to a quiet villa on the coast. Property Robert had left in my name. White shutters, a garden overgrown with rosemary and ivy. I hadn't seen it in years. It felt like stepping into a photograph of myself before I disappeared. I walked through every room slowly, touching walls like they were pages in a book I used to love. The silence there wasn't cruel. It was healing. That night, I slept with the windows open and dreamed of chalk dust and laughter. A week later, Evelyn arrived with coffee in the morning paper. The front page headline read, "Justice from Margaret Holloway. Elder abuse case sparks national reform talk. Underneath was a picture of me, hair combed, hands folded. I looked calm. Older, yes, but steady. Evelyn asked, "How does it feel?" I said, "Like standing in the sun after years of shade." She smiled. Robert would be proud. The legal hearings were swift. The footage, the notes, the medical reports, it all spoke louder than I ever had. The judge called it a pattern of psychological cruelty and neglect. Evan and Rachel were ordered to vacate the Cedar Valley house, surrender assets, and pay restitution. Their lawyer tried to plead misunderstanding. The judge cut him short. Neglect isn't a misunderstanding, it's a choice. When the gavel fell, I didn't feel triumph, just relief, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you finally breathe right. The lantern offered to escort me home, but I said no. Home was gone. I'd build a new one. That night, sitting on the porch, I watched the tide pull in and out and thought about what Robert used to tell his students. Real change starts small, like a seed that doesn't know it's a tree yet. So I decided to plant something new. A garden, a scholarship, a place for every child raised by someone brave enough to start over. I wrote the first check from Robert's trust that same week. Name on the account? The Witch's Garden Fund. Why that name? Because of what they called me, the old witch. Because words can wound, but they can also grow back stronger. I wanted every child, every grandmother, every forgotten person to know that being called a witch just means you still have power someone else doesn't understand. Carla came by to film a short follow-up piece. She asked if I had anything to say to Evan or Rachel. I told her, no, silence will do the teaching now. When she turned off the camera, she said quietly, "You're remarkable." I smiled. "No, I'm prepared. There's a difference." A month later, I got a letter. No return address, just 2 lines in Evan's handwriting. "I'm sorry, Mom. We lost everything." I folded it once, slid it into my notebook, and wrote underneath, "So did I. But I found myself." If you're still listening, maybe you've learned what I did. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's paperwork filed on time. It's evidence collected quietly. It's a garden blooming on land once salted with cruelty. When I look out at the rosemary and the lavender now, I think of my students, how they used to plant bean seeds in paper cups every spring. That's what this feels like, fragile, certain, alive. I keep Robert's note framed on my desk. The ink's fading, but the words still hold. Silence is power if you use it wisely. I used it, Robert, and it worked.
I never thought I'd get used to the quiet again. After years of walls that held anger, this silence felt different, open, calm, almost kind. The villa by the coast became more than a safe place. It became something living. Every morning, I made tea and opened the windows wide. The salt air came in, soft and sharp, like a reminder that life could still taste new. The first few weeks, I kept waiting for noise, for Rachel's footsteps, for Evan's voice, for some kind of chaos to follow me here. But it never did. The world had gone on turning without their approval. I started tending the garden Robert had planted years before. Back then, it was mostly wild rosemary, some lavender, and the old peony bush he said smelled like memory itself. Now, I trimmed, watered, planted new things. I kept telling myself I was just keeping busy, but the truth is, I was mending something. The earth forgives faster than people do. One afternoon, Evelyn came by with her husband, a retired attorney named James. They brought papers, legal work finalizing the foundation we'd talked about, the Witch's Garden Fund. Evelyn handed me a folder. "You're now the official founder," she said. "Scholarships for children raised by grandparents, legal aid for neglected seniors, and grants for caregivers who actually care." I laughed softly. Robert would have loved the name. She smiled. He would have loved the impact more. After they left, I sat on the porch with the papers on my lap and realized something. Every cruel thing they'd ever said, every relic, every witch, every burden had turned into the soil beneath this. They thought they buried me. They just planted me. That evening, I wrote in my notebook, "Today, the story stopped being about survival. It became about purpose." I started getting letters. Some came from strangers. An older woman from Ohio wrote, "Your story helped me call my daughter. We're talking again." A young man said, "My grandma raised me. I'm using your scholarship to study social work." There were dozens, each one folded carefully, each one proof that quiet justice can travel farther than noise. I began speaking to small community groups, not with microphones or cameras, just chairs in a circle, a pot of tea, and people who'd almost given up. I'd tell them, "You don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to write things down. Truth has a way of finding daylight." They'd nod, some crying quietly. That was enough. Months passed, the garden grew, the rosemary became a hedge, the lavender covered the steps, and I started seeing myself as something other than a victim. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in the small study Robert once used and imagine him there, typewriter on the desk, glasses halfway down his nose, tapping at the keys like they owed him answers. I'd whisper, "We did it, Robert." In my mind, I could almost hear him answer, "You always would." Evelyn stayed in touch. She became more than an ally. She became my friend. We'd sit under the porch light and talk about our husbands, our mistakes, the way love lingers even when the people don't. One evening, she said, "You know, Maggie, I think peace isn't the opposite of pain. It's what comes after you stop trying to change what already happened." I told her I'd write that down, and I did. Around the 1-year mark, I got another letter. This one from Evan. Short, shaky handwriting. "Mom, we lost everything. Please help us. The kids miss you." I read it twice, folded it carefully, and slid it into the same envelope that held his apology from before. I didn't reply. Some silences are sacred. I did, however, think about the children. They were innocent, caught between adults who should have known better. So through the Witch's Garden Fund, I opened a program for grandchild grants, small scholarships for kids raised by grandparents, in memory of the connection that once bound us all. Every time I signed those letters, "With Hope, Margaret L. Holloway," it felt like setting something right again, if only in a small way. The local paper came one day, wanting a photo for a "Where Are They Now" piece. I almost said no, but then I thought of all the women who might see it and recognize themselves in my wrinkles, my plain sweater, my eyes that had seen too much and survived anyway. So I let them take the picture. The article's headline read, "The Teacher Who Taught Us All." Underneath it, a quote of mine, You can't control who forgets you, but you can choose who remembers. Sometimes people ask if I forgave Evan and Rachel. Forgiveness, I tell them, isn't a key you turn once. It's a gate that sometimes stays closed for good reason. I don't wish them pain. I just wish them reflection. That's enough. The old Cedar Valley house was sold last spring. I never went back. Evelyn handled the paperwork. The proceeds went into the foundation. Some nights, I dream of it, the garage window, the sound of rain on that metal roof, and I don't feel fear anymore. Just distance. Like reading about a life that belonged to someone else. Now the days start and end in peace. I write every morning, at the kitchen table, same time, same mug, same pencil. I keep the habit like a classroom bell that still rings somewhere deep in me. In the afternoons, I work in the garden with a few volunteers. One of them, a young mother named Jenna, asked me once, "Why did you name it the Witch's Garden? Isn't that a little harsh?" I told her, because sometimes what they call you when they want to break you becomes the very thing that saves you. She laughed, said, "That's powerful." I said, "It's true." If you're still listening, maybe you've been through something like this, something quiet, something that made you feel small in your own home. If you have, I want you to remember this. You are not a relic. You are not a burden, and you are not what they call you when they forget your worth. Take notes. Keep evidence. And when the moment comes, use your silence like a tool, not a tomb. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's potential. Every story I write in my journal now begins with the same words. I am still here. Robert's thimble sits by my window still. I keep it there to remind myself that small, steady work can fix almost anything with time and patience. That's what the witch's garden is, a mending, a quiet one. When I walk the paths at sunset, I see rows of herbs and flowers where neglect once lived. The air smells of lavender and sage. The sea hums in the distance. It feels like a kind of forgiveness the earth decided on without asking me first. And that's fine. Sometimes the world heals around you before you realize you're healing too. So, if you've stayed until the end, thank you. If you've ever been silenced, locked away, or made to feel invisible, this story is for you. Because people forget, but stories don't. And sometimes the loudest truths are whispered behind locked doors. Because here on True Life Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Subscribe, stay with us, and help the silence end, one true story at a time.